I'm very delighted to moderate a panel of distinguished CISOs up here. This is going to be a discussion in which we'll be able to give you a little bit of insight as to what we've experienced and some of the things that we do as CISOs. So you get hopefully a little bit of information, both if you're working in the field and also for the vendors here, we're going to give you a little bit of insight of what's it take to get to into our office. Okay, so we'll give you a little bit of that as well. As for me, I'm Rich Cocchiara. I'll be moderating the session. I spent most of my career as the CTO for IBM's Risk and Security Division, and recently was the Chief Information Security Officer for the New York City Department of Education, the largest education system in the world. It's a little bit of a challenge. Right now, I'm the Cognitient CISO, Chief Innovation and Security Officer, and hopefully I'll be able to give you a little bit of insight. With that, I'm going to introduce my panel. First, Anthony Scarola, who is the IT Governance, Risk and Compliance and Change Management Officer for Apple Bank. And I'm going to turn it over to him in a second. Howard Israel is the virtual CISO for Mandiant with over 40 years of experience. And we have Keith Donnelly, who joined us at the last minute because one of our panelists came down with COVID, the new world we live in, okay? And Keith Donnelly is worked for Broadridge Financial Solution and leads their risk management area. So with that, I'm going to let Anthony here introduce himself.
Thank you, sir. Hi, everybody. Anthony Scarola. I'm the IT GRC officer for Apple Bank in New York City. It is not part of Apple, the company. I know I get that a lot. Apple Bank was founded in 1863, so it's a little old. 80 branches bank in New York City, in New York, I should say. I'm also, on the side, I also am a vCISO for a company called vCISO Services based in Tennessee. And do work for various credit unions currently across the United States. On the GRC side of the house at Apple, within the governance area, my team primarily focuses on managing policies. Of course, we work across the board with the CISO organization in managing the information security policies as well. Policies, procedures, scheduling the reviews, et cetera. On the risk side of the house, we also manage the IT risk and control self-assessments for the processes and controls managed within IT, manage all the issues for the bank, including regulatory issues, audit issues, self-identified issues, exceptions, reviews, and updating of those. And on the compliance side of the house, as you can imagine, we're a bank. There's a significant number of compliance requirements that banks need to, especially in New York, need to abide by, including NYDFS, FFIEC, and et cetera. Our team also interfaces, of course, with the CISO organization on a daily basis, consistent basis. And our CISO organization at the bank reports to the second line of defense into the enterprise risk management area. And for the, like I said, I'm also a vCISO for a credit union in Las Vegas. I was also previously senior consulting manager for Accenture. Worked with them for a couple of years, working with various financial institutions, primarily across the United States. And I was also enlisted in the United States Army. So that's a little bit about my background.
Thank you, Anthony. Next, I'd like Howard Israel to tell us a little bit about himself. Howard?
Hello, everybody. My name is Howard Israel. I've been involved in information security, cybersecurity, actually my entire career. This is my 40th year doing it. Started doing it my very first day on the job at NSA in 1982, and I've done it every single day since then. Background is computer science, 2 degrees there, and I've worked at NSA, AT&T Bell Laboratories, Lucent, Avaya, Johnson & Johnson, Fidessa, financial services company on Wall Street for over 10 years, and most recently at Mandiant for the last 4.5. At Mandiant, I lead and run the virtual CISO practice, where we have a team of people, very select number of consultants that act as virtual CISOs for clients, or we do CISO advisory. It's kind of the same service for our clients. I personally deliver it as well. Right now, I'm delivering it for 3 clients simultaneously, and have done it for about a dozen or so since I've been there. A central bank down in Latin America. I was their first chief information security officer they ever had until they hired a permanent person. A financial services firm out of Greece I'm currently delivering on, a technology firm in Silicon Valley, a major U.S. SLED customer, state local education customer in the U.S., a major medical system in the United States, and another technology company now based in Virginia. That comes to mind, most of the bigger customers and a potpourri of smaller ones. And I'm glad to be here, and I want to thank him, obviously, for getting us all together. This is a nice change of pace rather than sitting on a Zoom call.
Next, I'll introduce Keith Donnelly. Keith?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming out to the conference. I think it's been a great day for me, getting out here, meeting the vendors, meeting Kim, getting to learn a little bit about the technology, what's going on. It's really important. As for myself, I lead risk management, risk and compliance at Broadridge Financial Solutions. We're a fintech, and we provide technology solutions around the whole trading environment for banks and brokerage. If anybody has ever heard of Broadridge, we deal with about $4 to $7 trillion in market volume going through our systems every day. So, you know, we're the best little thing you never heard about. So we've got, you know, as for my role, I lead risk management. A sliver of that is cybersecurity as well. Overall, my experience, I stopped counting at 25 years. My background is more or less financial services, IT audit, risk management, compliance. I've been a development manager. I started my career as a computer operator in a data center. So everybody knows Big Iron. Everybody know what a mainframe is? ACL, ROC F2? Yeah, good. You need to learn that stuff. It's still here. But I think overall, as it relates to risk management and Broadridge Financial, you know, we keep the markets moving, and it's a critical role. As for my other things I've done in the past, I've worked at J.P. Morgan in the investment bank, retail bank at Citigroup, and Prudential Financial. So I've got a depth of knowledge, you know, across the board here, and hopefully helping to contribute to the panel, being a late moment ad here. So bring it on.
Thank you, Keith. As you can see, there is a wealth of knowledge here. We've got several questions that I'm going to ask the panel. We're going to ask them. I'm going to leave time at the end for each of you. If anybody wants to ask a question, something that you're dealing with, something that you've always wanted to know, you'll have time to ask that question, and we will attempt to answer it truthfully the way we would handle it. Okay, so there's no agenda here. We're not pushing any of our products. You've heard our background. You've heard, you know, our bona fides. So feel free to ask us questions at the end. This panel was created to talk about communications and how we communicate with our boards. Okay, that is a critical component of what every CISO has to do. So it doesn't matter if you've got the greatest technology. If you cannot convey that effectively, okay, you've got to get them on board. So the question I have for the panel, first question, do boards and non-security business leaders really care about cybersecurity, or are we just telling ourselves that? And do they need to understand it? So anybody want to take that one first? Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll take it first, and then you guys can jump in. The answer is that they absolutely have to understand it. When I was the CISO for the New York City Department of Education, I had to brief the chancellor. Now, I had to take what I was doing and put it in terms that he would understand it. Remember, he was overseeing 1.3 million students. He had 400,000 parents, 150,000 students, 1,400 schools, and we had the biggest target on their back that you could ever imagine. Why is that? If you wanted to attack something, attack a school system, the biggest one in the world. So conveying the risks to him and his team, who were mostly educators, was critically important. And they needed to understand it. They wanted to understand it. But they had to put it in terms that they could grasp. If I gave them just stats, they didn't get it. But if I put it in terms of how students were going to be impacted, the inability of students to learn, and then gave them a quarterly report with a risk register, they got it. After a while, even that board, even that group, were asking, take us through, where do we stand? What attacks are we looking at? What are they trying to do? Okay? Remember, this is the chancellor who's concerned about education, so it's critically important. And do they need to understand it? Absolutely. Anybody else want to? Keith?
Yeah, sure. I think overall, in terms of the boards and whether or not they're really on board with cybersecurity, I'll leave you with some thoughts. But if you look back in public, I work for a public company, and when you look back in the annual reports 10 to 15 years ago, right, and now look at them today, and just do a quick compare and contrast, right, you'll see a section in the annual report called risk factors, right, that the company needs to report and the board needs to report to shareholders, right, as part of the annual statements, as part of what they call the 10K reports, which are monthly. You know, within my firm, we have 26 risks that are publicly disclosed because we're a very transparent company. And our top risk is cybersecurity, right? So I would challenge everybody on the call here who, at the meeting here, who has that kind of interest, take a look at the annual report and see what's in there under risk factors, because cyber should be there in some way, shape, or form. Right? I think everybody's been around from an information security perspective. You can see that over time, everybody has said it's not about getting hacked. It's when is it going to happen, right? And when you make that kind of statement, the board takes note, and they have taken note. And you'll tell if they're really being transparent by looking in the annual report or the 10K statements for those companies. I just think that's something I wanted to share to the group at a high level. Some other things we're doing within our firm as it relates to risk management, right? We've put together a cyber strategy over the last several years. I can't say when, but over the last several years, we've put together a cyber strategy. We have funding. We have reporting around this. And overall, we report out to the board through a risk register monthly, right, of our key risks. And we sync up those risks with what actually gets tied into the annual report or the 10K statements for risk factors. And cyber is on top. So it's definitely something that keeps us up at night, but we need to be cautiously optimistic with what we're doing and controls.
Thank you, Keith. And I didn't take the question initially because I'm honestly shocked that really, the question is being posed that boards might not be interested in cybersecurity risks and threats. I think especially in today's day and age. I'm biased, obviously, as I work for financial services institutions, as I have for many years. I think in the financial services space, we obviously have our boards obviously have a fiduciary duty to be aware of the cybersecurity and other IT-related risks and threats that impact them. Impact obviously the money that's being held in the organization, as well as the information, very highly sensitive information about credit card numbers and account numbers and financial history, et cetera. So yeah, obviously it's crucial. I think a lot of the problem today is that, and this harkens back from a time when CISOs were primarily IT leaders, and we would bring technical information to those boards, and so the boards kind of get tuned out a little bit, I think, and that's been a problem that I think is evolving with the assistance of CISOs really taking more of a leadership role and a business leader role, understanding what is driving the business, what is driving the organization from a business goals and objectives standpoint, and then mapping their programs to those business goals and objectives. And I think that's where we've seen a lot of successes, at least in our institution and some of the others that I've worked for.
So you may have read or seen recently that the SEC has a new proposed rule that came out. I believe it was on March 9th. And just reading from the press release about it, it's a fairly short press release, but it does say this SEC is starting to focus on a new set of rules that will impose cybersecurity requirements on public companies, including specifically on the board of directors. Specifically, it says the board of directors' oversight of cybersecurity risk and management's role and expertise in assessing and managing cybersecurity risk and implementing cybersecurity policies and procedures. And then down towards the bottom of that, it talks about the proposal further would require annual reporting of certain proxy disclosure about the board of directors' cybersecurity expertise, if any. So if I was on a board and that was a requirement, I'd make sure I had some cybersecurity expertise on the board so I can report out and check on that box. Now, I'll tell you, the challenges these days are immense when managing and working with board of directors, or by the way, anybody on the senior leadership team. You get a very wide variety of knowledge and expertise at that level. Some people are very technical and very astute, and other people, frankly, are not. And I can tell you a little story. A friend of mine used to be on the board of directors for a Fortune 500 company, and when he was on that board, during the course of one of the meetings, the company handed out iPads to everybody on the board. Company issued iPads. And the conversation around that as they're handing it out was like, oh boy, I'm going to have my granddaughter show me how to work this thing. That was kind of the response, and laughing, ha, that's all very funny and everything. But, some of that is kind of serious, right? So, and like, it's the world we live in. So it becomes very challenging for us to discuss, educate, converse, and brief people at the senior leadership level, CEOs, COOs, directors, board of directors, et cetera. And the challenge can be especially hard because of the different levels of knowledge and expertise. So you have to be prepared to communicate at either the most basic level or fairly technical level, because you may have people on there that are techies.
Thank you. So I think, as you've heard, okay, cybersecurity is not an IT discussion anymore. It's at a board level, okay? It's at a very high board, and it's going to get higher. You, as cyber experts, are in that position to have that conversation. You're going to have to, because it's no longer, as Keith was saying, no longer if you're going to get hacked, it's when. And how are you going to handle it? How's the board going to handle it? It could be a make or break decision for that business. So it has to be at that level. Okay, let's move on to the next question. And this one is very similar. And it says, do cybersecurity leaders generally understand how to talk to boards? I want you to think about how you communicate, how we communicate, and how we have to communicate to those business people. Most of the time, they're not techies. They were not put in that position to be technical, but you need to translate it. So how do we talk to the board of business leaders about what they care about, and what are some of the biggest communication challenges we face? You look around this room, I bet you every one of these vendors here has a dashboard, right? And who's the dashboard geared towards? Is it geared towards the techie, or is it geared toward the business? Me as a CISO, I don't want to have to reinterpret the dashboard. I want to be able to take the information, put it into something that I can talk to the chancellor about. One of the reasons why my company, Cognitient, exists is because we help people understand where their gaps are, where their knowledge gaps are. You need to understand it. If you can't communicate that effectively, then you're wasting your time. Upper management doesn't understand what they're facing. I always used to tell my people, if I'm driving towards a bridge at 90 miles an hour and the bridge is out, I'd like to know ahead of time, because you are driving in the passenger seat with me. So we're both going off that cliff. We both go off that cliff, everybody loses, including all of the management. Used to be CIO stood for career is over. Okay? CISO stands for career is seriously over. Okay? The reason being is the CISO is the one who loses his or her job when there's a breach. At least it used to be. Now, everybody loses it because it's now table stakes. Everybody has to understand how to communicate that. Okay? So.
Thank you. So I'll elaborate a little bit more on the responsibilities of the CISO and the CISO organization. When I start working with an institution, one of the first things I'll do is I'll ask for the corporate strategy. Understand what is driving the business. What is the business's goals for the next couple of years? What are they looking to achieve? You know, it may be more detailed. They may be looking at various solutions, et cetera. The next step is really to start working with those individual lines of business and understand more about what they're trying to do. Because the CISO's responsibility is to secure the business. It's to secure those, you know, corporate strategic objectives and business objectives that are laid out in the plan. And of course, the CISO also has to secure the other information that is already in existence within the organization. So the information, like I said. So again, aligning the information security program to those business objectives and corporate objectives, I think is critical because again, that does help the CISO to then report on the risks to those business lines and put it in a way that can be easily digested by the boards and those business leaders.
Yeah, I think overall I'm spot on everybody's feedback at this point. In terms of how we, communication challenges with the board, I think some of the challenges I've seen firsthand is, when you go into the board meeting, you need to be prepared, right? You need to do your homework up front. You need to understand the objectives of the business. The board, rightfully so, their attention span is limited to things that relate to the vision of the firm, the sustainability of the firm, and the growth of the firm. So when you think about growing the firm, it's about revenue, right? So if there's anything you can do, you have to pick and choose, right? So if there's anything coming up that's serious enough that you want to pick and choose on, you've got to link it back to how it could impact revenue, right? What kind of use case do you have there? Remember, you've done your homework, because these guys and girls, they're not on the board because they're just people, right? They know their stuff. So you really need to be able to make that case for how this could impact the revenue, how it can slow down sales over time, how it could impact their supply chain, right? So I think those are basic comments, and you need to do your homework on the board as well. Again, look at the annual report. You'll see the board members. You'll see what their backgrounds are, right? Because they're a very diverse group from a subject matter expertise perspective. They have a lot of knowledge, a lot of connections. They want to share information. But what they traditionally do is they're focused on growth, division, and revenue. And they do have some people on there that represent audit and regulatory, in financial services. But that's not the majority. Remember, they're focused on sales and growth. So you got to link that story, what you need done, where you need your funding, link it back to, how it could take away from the revenue if you don't get what you need.
So when you communicate with the board, with members of the board, obviously, anytime you communicate with anybody, you should know your audience, right? Like he said, know who they are, know what their backgrounds are, understand where they're coming from. Now, the board's focus, they may meet between 4 and a dozen times a year for anywhere between an hour or two each time to maybe up to 2 days each time, all right? And you may get a 15-minute slice once a year, or you may be getting 30 to 45 minutes or an hour at each meeting, depending upon how important cybersecurity is to them. And part of that importance is, did they have any recent major incidents, which immediately, cybersecurity becomes front and center. So, you have to understand where their focus is. And if you have a small sliver of their time, they're thinking about many other problems other than cybersecurity. So they need a very short, concise message, because they just want to know, are things going well or are things not going well? If things are going well, congratulations, great job, see you next meeting, okay? If things are not going well and there are problems or risks or have been incidents, major incidents, especially things that have been in the press or data breaches, then they want answers. They want a story, they want solutions, and if you don't have solutions, then you better have a plan, because if you don't have those things, you're not prepared. So their essence, what they're focused on, are things going well? If things are not going well, then show me why, and show me why I should trust you, because they want to build confidence in their cybersecurity program. And that's one of your goals, is to build their confidence in your program. Because what they can do at their level is basically give you resources, take resources away, give you budget, take budget away, approve hiring, take staff away. Their focus is at a very high level, because all they want to do, honestly, is get you set up and working, and then go on to the next problem that they have to deal with.
Okay, we're going to get to questions in a bit. I'm going to make a bold assumption here and say that most of you are not CISOs, right? We are. So that means that you're supporting us, right? We're the ones that have to go to the board. Let me tell you, the worst feeling you could ever have is when you're in front of the board and you don't have the information you need. I don't know about you, but I really don't like winging it when I'm in front of my boss or my boss's boss, okay? That means our job together is to prepare a report, prepare something that we can use to convey the current risks. Vendors, same for you. I'm not here to interpret your data. I'm too busy. I need the data in a way I can consume it and put it in a report and therefore be able to convey it to the appropriate people. And by the way, if you think it's all about the board, it's not. You're talking to a lot of other people in your company, your organization. You still need to convey that information to them. So as Howard was saying, as the team was saying, how are you going to convey to them in a way that they understand it? Don't make them work, because if you see the glazed look in their eyes, it's because you've blown right past them and you lost them. So that means that was a worthless conversation. They don't get it. They don't understand it. They're not going to help you. They're not going to support you. You're not going to go very far in your career. Your goal is to be the bridge between you, the departments, and you, the CISO, you, the board, and to have the information. So you're going to have to work that. And let me give you a little bit of advice. If your vendors are not giving you what you need, get another vendor. Look around this room. They're all here. Okay? I know they're all waving. I'm over here. I'm over here. There are some excellent, in fact, all the people here, let me just preface that. All the vendors here are listening and they get it. And they're trying their best. But you got to press them. And they'll deliver. They can. Okay? Just wanted to let you know that don't think it's all about CISO. It's about everybody else. Okay, so how often should the CISO be meeting with the board? Ad hoc, quarterly, annually? Do cybersecurity leaders need to develop more business skills? From my own personal perspective, absolutely, you got to have business skills. If you're a techie geek like me, it's a struggle. I got to bring it down so that they can understand what I'm talking about. Because I understand if I don't do that, I'm wasting their time, I'm wasting my time, and guess what? I won't have a very fruitful career. I earned every one of these gray hairs. Okay, I'm very proud of them, okay? But I've earned them because I was able to convey it. And you've got to be able to figure that out. It's the most critical skill you will have. So you've got to learn how to do that. How often should you meet with the board? As often as you can. Okay? I was really fond of saying, for some reason, cybersecurity incidents don't seem to want to wait at the quarter close. I don't know. They're very rude. They don't want to wait until the end of the quarter, so I have all the data. Happens during the week, during the month. You want to be able to make sure that you can convey that. So make sure that you try to meet with them as soon as possible. And by the way, if you don't have an incident response plan, get one. It's part of your communications, is to be able to convey when something bad happens. And guess what? It's going to happen. Don't kid yourself. Be prepared for it. Okay?
Yeah, I'll harp a little bit more on the business. The board and other areas of the business, enterprise risk, audit, they don't want to see, audit might want to see your vulnerability data, but the others probably are not interested in seeing vulnerability data. They're not interested in seeing your NIST cybersecurity framework assessment results. That's not business talk. What's business talk to them is red, amber, and green. And how those red, amber, and green, those KRIs, how those align to the business's objectives. So again, understanding what the business's objectives are, and I'm just repeating myself at this point, but that, again, I think that is business speak, and that's what the board wants to hear. Very quickly.
So I think the points made previously are excellent. Most times, cybersecurity gets delegated at the board level down to the risk subcommittee. They're the ones that typically are responsible for it. Most times, the CISO or Director of Security, VP Security, would be briefing that subcommittee, and then potentially the board maybe once a year, the subcommittee maybe quarterly. That's the typical cadence I have seen, but every company is different for sure. And the previous points mentioned about understanding the business, absolutely, you have to understand how cybersecurity fits to the success of the business. So that actually means understanding what the business is, how they do business, how they generate revenue, how they manufacture a product or service, how they deliver that, how they all make that happen and generate income, revenue as well as net income. Understanding financial statements. Honestly, everybody should know how to do that. If you're talking to the board, you have to understand impact. And honestly, it's very important to have at least a basic business understanding of financial statements, difference between an income statement versus a balance sheet versus statement of financial condition or stockholders' equity. Just the basics. Nothing crazy, nothing like what I know, because I just have too much info on that stuff myself. But, you got to understand how the business works, because you have to understand how cybersecurity fits into that, because the board's going to ask you, if this bad thing happens, what's that going to do with my supply chain? Or what's that going to do with our production line? All right? IoT systems, obviously, that's in the news more and more these days. I mean, Colonial Pipeline, big news item just a year ago, just under a year ago maybe. And, a lot of systems, a lot of companies have those types of systems where their IoT systems are responsible for generating revenue. All right? They make product. They generate revenue. So questions like that are going to come up. Now, what I like to do, focus on risk. I actually don't like the term information security, cybersecurity. I think it's archaic. It does not capture the essence of what we do every day. What we do is manage risk and reduce risk. So I like to focus on risk management. I'd like to get away from the term cybersecurity. If we could ban that, I'd be a very, very happy person. And many more people would understand what the security group does, the risk group does.
Yeah, well said. I think if there were 5 things I would look at in terms of communications improvement, working with the board, spot on about financials, right? You need to understand how financials work, right? When you're talking about what hits your P&L, you need to understand that, because that's the level that the board talks at, right? What's the impact? What percent? What do you think? If they're using those types of terms with you in the meeting, it's going well, right? Another thing, you know, I have a nasty habit, like everybody in a room, of using tech jargon, right? And tech jargon, if you say IoT or IP, they might call their kids to translate, right? And remember, like we were saying before on the panel, when you're with the board, you got 15 minutes. I usually get 5, right? So, and then when I got 5, it was 30, right? So they keep raising the bar on you, and it's a good thing. But you shouldn't really use any tech jargon. They know business, right? And that's how you can make a point and an impact if you know the business, know the financials. Other things to think about, risk, right? When you're talking about, I don't know, if there's a particular vulnerability, they read about Log4j in the Wall Street Journal, right? They don't want to know how you're eradicating it across the firm. They want to know what your process is and when will you be done. And if there's any risk you're willing to accept, right? Some of these Log4j vulnerability exploits might be internal in a network on a separate segment somewhere that they don't necessarily need to worry about. I mean, you could disclose that. Don't get me wrong, you want to be transparent, but you want to focus on the real risk, the value nuggets there. And lastly, you know, I'm a proponent of the KISS principle, right? Keep it simple. Again, you're going to have 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 seconds. When you present something, they got to be able to get it in 10, 15 seconds. You got to clear it that quickly. Questions are a separate issue, but when you're looking at these decks, and I think you brought this up as well, that you need to make sure that you're vetting this material before it gets to the board. So there's a whole process around this that you need to be aware of. And then lastly, stick to the facts, right? If they ask you for your opinion, that's fine, but you've got to present the facts to the board because ultimately they're culpable, right? That's kind of what I think people need to work on as it relates to, you know, improving and seizing opportunities with the board. Lastly, our risk management group is separate from information security. The information security group usually meets with the board quarterly, and then our risk management group is a subset of an executive leadership team that meets monthly across the firm, right? And they go out, and each month it's a different business unit or a different segment they're focusing in on to make sure they're getting a good understanding of risk. And what keeps them up at night goes up to the board and becomes action items. And if it's worthy, it gets funding. So that's
All great points, and hopefully, you know, you understand that there's a lot of things you've got to do, and it's just not acting as a CISO, but acting in your role and what you've got to do. Okay, next question. What are some of the hot issues, opportunities they need to be aware of? You know, so what does the board need to be aware of? We've all seen all kinds of things pop up. In fact, like every day, we're seeing something. But as Keith said, as Anthony said, and Howard said, you got to put it in terms of what they consider to be important. And so if you're saying, hey, like, you know, you're going to give them some esoteric attack that's going on, put it in terms of that what they want to know. So there's a lot of things. I'm going to let the board talk about what they think are some of the hottest issues going on in the world today.
Thank you, Rich. So some of the most critical issues that I see facing the companies, I think, are more around people and people issues. You know, we hire good people to work for us, and oftentimes these people assume that all the things they touch and all the risk associated with it is theirs to manage and deal with. Oftentimes, individuals may not want to raise their hand and say, hey, you know what, we've got this problem. We're going to need some more resources to deal with it. You know, it's a very challenging thing to do today, especially considering where we're at with resources. But sometimes that does need to be raised up. You know, holistic risk issues should be raised up to the appropriate level for the appropriate level of management and awareness. So bringing those issues to the board oftentimes is vital. So inadequate reporting of those risks, leading to the mismanagement of prioritization of remediation. Again, these great people that we have think that the prioritization of all their risk issues is also something that they need to manage. And they do oftentimes do a great job of that. However, it may not be the most appropriate level of prioritization. It may need to be changed. And again, some of those issues need to be raised up for those discussions to take place. Of course, lack of resources. There was a great presentation today about resources. And there are a lot of great ideas about working with school systems and things along those lines to bring more people in. Lack of driving more senior management accountability or the necessary support. And really, all of the above just kind of repeating in a vicious cycle. So I think those are, besides the latest vulnerability, Log4j, et cetera, I think that that some of the people issues that we have may trump a lot of those other areas.
What was the question?
What are the hot issues, buddy?
Hot issues. So potentially whatever's in the news in the last week may be a hot issue. Obviously, any major cybersecurity issues or incidents, that anything that hits the general press is a candidate for discussion. Focus on risk. The highest level of risk is what I focus on, and I want to show what I'm doing about those risks. Those are very important to them. One of the more common questions I've gotten from my clients is, what do I present to the board? Because the board doesn't know what to ask, and sometimes the CISO just doesn't know how to approach that conversation. So I actually sketched out kind of what I would call a sample set of agenda items to hit, namely things like covering, like I said, the risks, staffing levels, third-party supplier, security issues in terms of concerns around that program, major projects that are in flight or planned for that we're doing, again, to reduce risk to the entire environment, discussing impact to clients, dealing with due diligence that clients are asking your company to support in terms of filling out their questionnaires and supplying them with auditing information, et cetera, to assert and show to them that you're running a good shop, a tight shop, a secure shop. Obviously, a briefing on major security incidents, I think I mentioned that. And future plans, like what you're going to be doing the next quarter or the next year, right? So you want to assert and explain what is your security program, again, so that they have confidence in that program and can rest at night. And where there's areas where you have problems or gaps and you lack resources or you need help on, that's the time to raise it up. And it should not be a surprise to the executives before you go in there what you're going to look for or what you're going to ask for. They should be aware about that. That's the opportunity to try to get resources if you need something.
Yeah, I think I'm going to show my age, but about 20, 25 years ago, for those who were born by then, you'd open up the Wall Street Journal and, like you were saying, Howard, right? Whatever's on the cover that day, that was your assignment as an information security person, right? So if there was a vulnerability that came out, slammer, an old vulnerability, right? That hits the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and sure enough, your whole information security duty detail was focused on follow-up. Do we have an exposure? What is the exposure? What's our plan to remediate? Right, fast forward to today, I think, it's not so much of a hot issue. It's out there, but there's more controls, there's more awareness, and there's more being done. So those firefights of 20, 25 years ago aren't happening now. We learned a lot from those lessons. As it relates to hot issues, from a risk management perspective, as well as cyber, we have a very repetitive process that we follow. Right? Somebody talked earlier about having that incident management plan, right? You need it because it's a script. Because if not only the board calls, if your clients call and say, do you have an exposure? Do you have an exploit? Okay, you need to open up the bridge internally, get everything moving along. People already understand what they need to do because there's that script around that incident process. Hot issues that have come up recently related to our firm have been things like Russia and the Ukraine, right? And some of the questions are, what's our exposure, right? Same thing with a vulnerability, but it's people exposure at this point, right? Do we have any subject matter experts or developers in the Ukraine? Well, in fact, we have them in the Ukraine and Russia. So, what's our plan? How are, these people are knowledge experts. How are we going to resolve the issue, right? Do we need to move them somewhere? Can we move them somewhere? Are there visa restrictions, right? All these other items come to bear. But having that repeatable process will help everybody as it relates to mitigating risk or managing risk as it relates to these hot issues. So that's...
Okay, thanks. We're on to the last question here, and then we'll open up the floor. I'm going to ask everybody to keep this pretty net. What's one takeaway you would give a CISO wanting to be more effective communicating cybersecurity to the board and business leaders? So I'm going to kind of change that a little bit. What is one takeaway I would give to you, both as people in the audience and the vendors, okay? For you, know your audience. Know who you're talking to. What's in it for them? We're all human. You're talking to me. I'm in the back of my mind thinking, why should I give you 5 minutes of my time? What's in it for me? How are you going to communicate it? If you're a vendor and you're coming to see me as a CISO, same thing. Why should I listen to you? How are you going to make my job easier? Don't make me work for it. Make sure you know my business when you come in to see me. And if I'm communicating to somebody in my team, I want to make sure I know what's important to them. So know who you're talking to.
Yeah, and I would say, again, understand the business, I think, first and foremost. And, any issues that you have, make sure that those are aligning to those business drivers, those business goals and objectives, because that's how you're going to be able to clearly communicate that to the board and for them to be able to support you. Once they understand how those risks and issues impact the business's goals and objectives, it should be a fairly clear conversation after that. This is what we need to get you what you need. You need to do A, B, and C. Here's what we need to do to support you. If they don't like the cost, of course they can find another CISO. Typically they hired a good individual there to support the business, and that's what I would say to take away.
Sure. I think overall, as it relates to being more effective, assuming you've developed a relationship with the board at this point, you want to make sure that when you've got your plan, right, that you've got maybe a 2 to 3 year plan out there, that you've got budget support, and that you're making progress against, your overall cyber strategy. And lastly, managing the expectation, letting them know that things could change because some other exploit might come out from somewhere else, right? That's all important in terms of building relationships. So having a plan together, the overall strategy, demonstrating progress against your milestones and budget is I think, paramount to really making a good relationship with the board, because you're the new person on the block, right?
So what I would focus on is keeping the message to things and subject matter that's important to them, not the trivial stuff, not problems with Active Directory or your password complexity rules. That's just not of interest. So make the message relevant to what they care about. Keep the message simple, but be prepared to get into the details if they go down that road. So if you hit somebody that really does have some deeper technical knowledge than, say, the average board member, you got to be prepared for that. So that's the best advice I could give.
Okay, so those are our questions. I'm going to now open it up to questions. I know you had one. You wanted to ask a question, so.
Hi, Sonal Shah, American Express. I just wanted to thank you all for your valuable time to us, and I wanted to thank Kim, I don't know where she is running around, for inviting us over here. I didn't have a question, but I just wanted to add on to our conversation about communicating to the board, talking to them about brand damage or the reputation impact will definitely draw their attention to us. getting rid of the CISO is definitely not going to work out. So that's what I wanted to add. That's it. Thank you.
Is there any other questions?
Yeah, I would think you're spot on, right, as it relates to reputation. But then again, you got to remember, they want everything quantified. It's very easy to say your business is going to be stopped, right? But like I said, they're going to come back with another question, and you'll get the action items. So I think overall reputation, solid, great point, but you've got to do your homework, right? You've got to be ready for that next question. You got to anticipate and have the passion too. So I see you have it. Yeah, if you can, right.
Just understand also that it's not just business. I said before, I worked for government. That's a whole different view of how you got to present it. They don't hear it. There's nothing about revenue there. There's no revenue. What they're concerned about, what they were concerned about is butts in seats. How do I keep more students in seats? Know your audience. Know your audience. Know what it's going to mean to them. Know what it means to the chancellor if the schools get shut down because of something. So know your audience.
I think this is a question that might relate to the vendors a little bit more. So as a sales guy, when we're reaching out to you, whether it's email or cold call, what catches your attention? I'm sure you guys get tons of emails and solicitations a day, but when I reach out to you, what sticks out? Are you looking for a short email? I know you're not looking for a long email, but what's going to grab your attention, whether it's a header line or whether it's information that's within that email that's going to say, hey, this is worthwhile giving your time, or should we reach down lower level people? Just some insight there would be helpful.
Do you have a crystal ball?
I could find one.
No, I think it's about relationship building, right? I mean, building relationships with your partners and customers and vendors, I think is important to that discussion, because you should then be able to provide the solution that we need, right? So you don't have a crystal ball, but building a relationship as much as possible, I think, is the way to answer that question, because then you can provide what's necessary at that moment. And every moment will be different, you know, just as the environment that we're in. You know, every cyber threat is different. Every, you know, risk is different. So it just depends. If you have the relationship, you should have more knowledge about those issues that are impacting the CISO organization, and therefore you can help to provide it. And you know, I hate to say, but try to be vendor agnostic as well, because that helps to build relationships, you know, as much as possible. I know you're not charged with that by your bosses, but that's something that definitely helps the CISO organization.
Thank you.
So the direct answer is it's potluck, because people, CISOs, senior directors, VPs in security, they're focused on problems constantly switching between problem to problem. If you're potluck, you have a solution that I need today, you win, right? I'm interested. I want to hear more. I want to understand how it works. I want to get into it. But if it's not something that I have a problem with today, I'm not focused on, then, and frankly, I don't have the time. I just don't. Sorry. But that's the truth. That's the truth.
I think one thing that would rouse more of my attention is, and I know this is difficult because vendors, it's a service profit chain, right? So you're going to build a product, and what the client wants is what you'll deliver, right? You'll deliver the first release, and then the clients will all have enhancements, right? And that's business, nothing wrong with it. But I think what I would really love to see, and this would be tough because, again, service profit chain, right? You're only going to make money if people buy your software. So you're not going to go out 15 years with a plan. I'm not asking you to. But maybe going out 2 or 3 years with where you are and what your vision is will help. And I know from my perspective, that gets back to building the long-term relationship, because I can see how you fit into our plans over time. And if I currently have a gap, and I know somebody who's got a product, right, like hits the Wall Street Journal, call me, right? Because I know everybody's focused on it. But if there's nothing in the Wall Street Journal, it seems like it could be more of a cold call. unless you're there building the relationship. So I hope that helps.
I will tell you from my perspective, it's about knowing my business. And so nothing frustrates me more, or used to frustrate me more, than to get an email from, a vendor saying, hey, I got a great product, and let me show you how it works in banking. And I'm like, I'm in education. And I'd ask, you got any use cases for education? No. You should have thought of that before you called me, okay? Know your customer, know what they're looking for, put it in terms that it makes sense to me, don't make me work for it, don't make me translate banking, and I do know banking, but banking into education, don't make me do that. Know what I'm going through, give me use cases, give me examples, give me whatever in my terms, so I can easily use it. If I have to rewrite a white paper for you, I'm doing your job. Give me some of your commission. I want a slice, okay? Ain't gonna happen. So make sure you know me, okay? Any other questions?
I have a question too. Great insights, by the way. I just think it's a great panel. Everyone just bring great information. I have some. I'm with this company called Typing DNA. I'm CEO of the company and started the company, and we're in the zero trust field. And I'm kind of curious, how do you think the risks associated with people working remotely and people working like from home, from everywhere, evolved? And how do you mitigate those risks lately now with the pandemic, and people like kind of don't want to go back to the office and all that? And how do you look from a zero trust perspective at all this? How big the risks are actual there, or is it just buzzwords and things we just like to talk about? Thank you.
Yeah, I think overall, working remotely has really been, there's been a catalyst with the pandemic, right? With more people working remotely globally, right? Not just in the U.S. So you can make some generalizations about, persona of U.S., the employees, the culture. They're all cleared in financial services. They take background checks, stuff like that, right? To give clients additional comfort. In the rest of the world, it's not necessarily like that. Right? Try to have a credit report run on somebody in another country in certain parts of Asia, and nothing's really in place. So how do you implement controls for those types of employees during a pandemic where it's remote? And some of the activities we've done is we've actually we've worked with vendors who had solutions, right, to prevent associates in other countries or consultants from actually copying data, screenshots, stuff like that, to mitigate some risk. In some ways, when you're dealing, with this new environment of working remotely, you may need to reassess your policies to say, are they strong enough, right? Do you need some level of comfort by having a background check performed for, people in university, not students, because there's a lot of intellectual property that can go overseas, right? So I think it's a matter of revisiting your policies, and you definitely need to implement more technology. So during the pandemic, we did that. And, we did implement some additional policies around background checks. And we also strengthened our security controls on the endpoints, right, as a result of that. So that some employees in cases couldn't, copy data off. Don't get me wrong, if somebody's there shoulder surfing, it might happen, right? You can't put a person in that room, but you can monitor put more keyboard monitoring in and other types of activities. And so that's what we did. It was a combination of reassessing policies, implementing new policies as a result of the assessment, and then more technology to mitigate risk. But there's always, zero trust. I think somebody said it in one of the sessions over there. You know, you can, if you work for the U.S. government, you might be able to implement zero trust, right? Because they have infinite resources. Financial services, other industries, we don't have those infinite resources. So it's about minimizing risk as opposed to, you know, eradicating it. Does that help?
So I'll keep it fairly short. It's interesting that this whole recent focus on remote work and, you know, locking it down and making it secure. I've worked remotely on every single job I've had. It's not a new thing, you know. It's just new now because there's just so many more people doing it, right? So that's why the risk and the exposure has gone up. So clearly you do things like you want to provide, you know, secure endpoints for your users, not let them use their home PC to remote in, right? Whatever you can do to lock that down, you know, wherever you could turn that dial to reduce the exposure and risk, that's what people have been doing. I said I'd keep it short.
It's interesting you should bring that up because I think you're only partially there. We're all talking about working remotely, right? How are your employees going to work remotely? My question to you is, what makes you think you're going to have employees? COVID-19 has taught us one thing. There's a huge workforce out there that doesn't want to work for a company. They want to work 6 months out of the year out of their Winnebago in the Grand Canyon. They're not coming to your office. You're going to ask for a discrete piece of work to be done. They're going to do the work, and then they're going to go away, and they're going to go skiing for another 2 months. That is your new employee. Deal with that. So think about how you're going to be working with remote employees who are not even your employees. They're a bunch of contractors. They're going to be entire corporations that are going to be staffed with just contractors. No employees. That's the new reality. That's what you're going to be dealing with. So get beyond the remote. Get to the new world. It's a new world order. COVID-19 just rocked our world and changed everything.
Financial services space, we've had remote users since internet banking was invented, right? All of our customers. So, yes, I think I'm a little, you know, biased in that space. It's we are used to dealing with that. Like everybody said here, it's basically the same. It's kind of the same old thing. It's just a little more of it. Primarily is the way that we've been focused on.
Okay, I know we're out of time. We've gone 5 minutes over. A few of us are going to stick around for the networking hour because, well, there's a bar in the back of the room. And luckily, we're not standing between you and the bar. Let me first thank again FutureCon and Kim for getting us all together. Thank you very much.